Okay. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great, thanks. Hello, everyone. Welcome this evening. I'm Jean Wilson. I'm the current president of the Redbud chapter of the California Native Plant Society. I'm pleased to be able to introduce our speaker this evening, who is Shane Hanofee. He has, we are so lucky to have Shane. He is our vice president. He's also the web editor and active as a co-chair of our plant sales. He is a whiz at identifying all kinds of plants. And if you've seen what he's posted on Facebook, book, and so on, you can see that he has a wealth of information and knowledge. He's also a champion on Inaturalist and has how many thousand?
I just crossed 7,000 this week.
so he knows. But one of the things that is exciting about this is he's going to introduce those of us who are new to Inaturalist about how to use this amazing tool and why he's going to explain why it's so important for being able to understand and preserve California's native flora and fauna, but mostly flora and mosses and fungi, and I'm forgetting something there. Anyway, we really look forward to having a chance to find out more about how to use Inaturalist. Thank you very much, Shane.
Great, thank you, Jean. Thanks for that introduction. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. Today, we're going to talk a bit about the website and the app Inaturalist. I hope most of you have some familiarity with it in that at least you've heard of it and you're more curious on how it works and how to better utilize it, how to have a better chance that your observations are identified or are usable to the larger scientific community. And I guess I'll start by just mentioning what Inaturalist is. And essentially, it's a multifaceted kind of website where you take pictures of various living organisms, you post them on the website. There's a group of experts and novices alike who will help you identify those items. And then once there's a consensus on what you've photographed and uploaded to the site, that data is then available to scientists all around the world who can utilize just an unbelievable amount of information from what you upload. And so I'm going to share my screen. A lot of what we're going to be doing today is me taking you through the website and explaining some of the features, explaining how to do an upload. I've talked to some people who can find it rather confusing, a little intimidating, and or frustrating. And so I want to try to dispel a little bit of that. As I mentioned, there is also an app. And so the app and the website kind of go hand in hand. And the website has the largest amount of functionality. The app has a lot less happening with it, but the app serves more as an upload tool more than anything. So, you know, a lot of us have our smartphones with us when we go out into the field. You can take pictures on your phone. The quality of those pictures is just absolutely amazing these days. And so you can take those pictures directly from your phone and upload them onto your Inaturalist account using the app, rather than having to transfer those photos over onto your computer first and then upload them through the website. So that's really the main difference, other than the website having a lot more functionality, a lot more ways of visualizing your data, a lot more ways of exploring your community and the natural world at large. And so essentially what we got over here that I'm showing you is the front page of Inaturalist. You have an account. My username is Sapien Shane because Sapien is my species, and I think I'm like variety Shane. So I went with that. And a little icon for your avatar there. And so here's where once you start using the site, you'll get updates about, you know, someone's identified something that you've uploaded, or if you follow people, which we'll get into that a little later, you'll get to see updates into what they've been uploading and what they've been identifying. And so this front page here is essentially so you can get access to every other part of the site. And so let's start with the Explore feature. And I realize there's a bit of a delay from what I'm showing you and the words that are coming out of my mouth, so bear with me. And also I've got rural internet, so things might be a little slow to load. But the Explore page is basically a way of looking through other people's observations. So what we're looking at right here is all of the iNaturalist observations around the world. And so to date, as of this second, there are over 55 million uploads onto iNaturalist, representing 309,000 species with 171 identifiers and almost 1.5 million people, individual people making those observations. And so you can look through all of this data if you want to see everything happening around the world. And there's several different ways of looking at it. There's the grid mode, which we're in right now. There's list mode, and list mode kind of condenses everything. And you can see there's even people here uploading past observations from 2017 currently. And then there's what I really like is the map version. And so the map shows you the observations as it's superimposed onto a map of the world. And as this is slow to load here, there you go. So you can see at this stage, zoomed really far out, it's kind of showing you the densities of observations. So a lot of stuff in North America, a lot of stuff in Europe, a lot less in the Sahara, but you know, there's not a whole bunch to see there, not a whole bunch of living organisms. And then as you zoom in, I want to point out, you know what, I'm going to make this a little faster here. Or not, we're going to zoom in. Essentially what I'm showing you is as you zoom in this map closer and closer, eventually these little red squares which show you the density of observations in a given area are going to give way to actual pins. And those pins show you the exact location of the observations. So let's see if we can get close enough here in a timely fashion. There we go. So as you can see, it's turned into all of these different pins, and the pins are color-coded based on the kingdom of life. So green pins are plants, pink pins are fungi, blue is birds, I think. And then if you're able to click on one of these pins, it will bring up information about that specific observation. And since this is going quite slow, I'm going to skip that for right now because we're going to get into it a little bit more in a second. So you also have these bars at the top. So you can look for specific species or you can check in a specific location. So we can zoom in a little bit more. Let's look at what is in Empire Mine here in Grass Valley in Nevada County. And I apologize that my internet is being quite slow and making this a lot more difficult. But as it's loading, we can see we have over 1,200 observations here in Empire Mine, a lot of plants. You can almost see the outlines of the trails in the park from people like myself who walk along and take pictures of pretty much everything that they see there. Looks like one of the more recent one is this sulfur tuft posted here. And so let's click on that and let's go into a taxon page and explore what it looks like when you're looking at an individual observation. And as you can see, I have opened up quite a bit of tabs at the top, so this isn't going to happen for every single part of my talk here. I kind of expected this to happen a little bit and tried to head it off. So here we have a picture of a sulfur tuft mushroom, a Hypholoma fasciculare, posted by Rick R. And it shows the date and the map of the location. And you can see that there are several pictures here. He has wisely taken pictures of the underside of the mushroom as well, which is always important when you're showing mushrooms. And then down here is the area where Rick has suggested that this is the sulfur tuft. And then Damon Teig has corroborated that ID and agrees with him and says that it is a sulfur tuft. And so basically how Inaturalist works is if there are 2/3 of people in agreement, then it's going to basically shuffle that observation into research grade and choose that species as the community ID. So if I were to come in here and let's say I thought this was a different mushroom and I typed in a different species and disagreed, this would then show in this bar where it shows the 2/3 mark that there's 2 saying it's sulfur tuft and 1 disagreeing. And so long as it's 2/3, it'll continue to be research grade. Otherwise, it will fall down into needs ID category. And that's a really important distinction to make because the research grade observations are the only ones which are going to be released to scientists working on various projects. And it's really important that there's a consensus because as we'll see in a little bit, there is quite a bit of misidentifications that happen, and it's very easy to make mistakes. I mean, you're trying to identify things from pictures. You're getting a limited amount of context from seeing it in the field. And certainly even in the field, people can make mistakes. So just to take a step back, I do want to mention that I'm willing to take questions during the course of my talk here. And if you wouldn't mind, if you do have a question, rather than unmuting yourself, typing that into the chat. And then our moderator, Chrissy Freeman, will read those questions to me, and I'll do my best to answer them. So I do see that there are some already in the chat here, and I'm going to address the one about how to see the world. I only see my observations. So in order to see the entire world, rather than clicking on, sorry, I had a pop-up come up. Rather than clicking on your observations on the top nav there, you're going to click on Explore. And by default, that should bring up the map of the world. And then you have to zoom in or type in a species or a location to narrow things down. So if you're looking at just if you click on the Your Observations tab, then you'll see your own. And Explore is so you can see everyone's, essentially.
Shane?
And yes.
A couple of people, Kimberly and Ann, have asked some really basic, great starter questions. The first one is, sure. What if you don't know what you're photographing? What do you put down? What do you put down if you don't know? And then a related question is, does Inaturalist ask that folks who identify a species explain the identifying features or similar looking plants that could be misidentified? Or I'm going to extrapolate here and say, what if you do know that kind of information? Is there a place where you can put that information?
Oh, absolutely. So to answer the first question, what you want to put in as as your first species is the highest level taxa that you are 100% sure of. So what I mean by that is, we all know about like the kingdoms and classes, orders, and so on and so forth. So whichever, if you're looking at a fungi here and you have no idea what fungi you're looking at, you don't know the family, you don't know the order, you would put it in at the kingdom level. And so you just write fungi and enter it in as fungi. If you don't even know what kingdom it might be, you're looking at, some really bizarre looking thing that you found in the woods, you can just leave it blank as an unknown species. That's totally fine. Or you can put it in as life, which is kind of the overarching one. In any case that you do that, it's really important, I think, that you don't make guesses on here, and you don't say, well, in the case of plants, just to throw out an example, if you're 100% sure that it's a flowering plant, and so an angiosperm, but you think it might be in the blueberry family in Ericaceae, just put it as flowering plants, because people will come along and narrow it down for you. And it might take a little bit because, this isn't really relying on any sort of algorithm or anything. It's waiting for real people to actually find your observation and give you some insight into that. And if you are uploading things on iNaturalist and you're finding that you're not getting any interaction, it could be for a number of reasons, but it might just be that you haven't shown enough information in that picture in order for someone to really make a guess. And I will say, I monitor 6 counties in the Northern California foothill, and I make sure that there are, unless I literally cannot interpret what is happening in a picture, I try really hard to make sure that there are no unknown species. And at least, I don't know much about birds or fish, for instance, but I'll put them in the kingdoms or the phyla, rather, for birds and fish, so that the people who do know those things are much more likely to find them. And so, as we'll get into a little bit later, people are searching for specific groups of organisms that they specialize oftentimes. And so you might search the site for just fungi if you're a mycologist, or you might search for just plants if you're a botanist. And if you specialize in a certain family or a certain genus, you might search for just those families and genera, and to narrow down from that 55 million number and be able to work with a manageable amount. I tend to be more broad because I like to make sure that people are getting something out of their time on iNaturalist. And so any of those observations that are just sitting as unknown species, the only way, at least in the 6 counties that I monitor, it would be sitting as an unknown species is I just haven't, I can't make heads or tails of what you've posted. Because you have to try really hard to not be able to file something into one of the kingdoms at the very least. And if you have an idea for what you have, you can use the notes section, or you can enter in a name as a placeholder. And again, these are things I'm going to show you exactly what I'm talking about once we get into. I'm going to do an upload, and we'll kind of go through all of that because I know it's a little abstract now without me actually showing you on the computer. But I hope that answers those 2 questions there. Were there any others, Chrissy?
I had to unmute myself. Now I had to unmute myself. No, that's all for now. Let's see where you take us next, Shane.
Okay. So, you know what? On that note, why don't we? Well, here's what I wanted to do next. I want to talk about some of the uses of the information that you upload. So it's lots of different people use iNaturalist for many different reasons. So you can use it personally if you want to basically replace or at least supplement nature journaling and just keep track of all of the organisms that you see. Or maybe you're interested in a very specific group and you want to just track those organisms that you're interested in. You know, if you're just into Vaccinium species, you just upload all the Vaccinium that you see. That's totally fine. You can pretty much use this tool however you see fit. And you'd be amazed at the kinds of information that people can get out of these pictures, and the kinds of studies that come out of this data collection. And so I went on Google Scholar earlier, and I searched for iNaturalist related papers that have been posted on Google Scholar. And so I pulled up a couple good examples of what scientists are using this data for and what you could potentially be contributing for. So there's this one here that says, using iNaturalist to obtain distribution data for Idaho amphibians and reptiles. So people are uploading pictures of amphibians and reptiles, and then people who are studying those things are able to actually go and figure out the distribution of these different species. And while it's not perfect, it gives you a really good approximation. It gives you a really good idea. Or there's this one, the first record of the painted hand mudbug, which I really love that common name, in Ontario and Canada, and the significance of iNaturalist in making new discoveries. Let's see, what else do we have? Whoops, I stopped sharing by accident. Of course, the stop share button is laying over all of the tabs that I'm trying to access, so it's not making things simple for me. Okay, an observation. Oh, we have a delay. There we go. An observation of a very rare threatened species of Philippine bumblebee on iNaturalist and the importance of citizen science and conservation biology. And then this one says, using iNaturalist observations to detect disease in red mangroves. So in this instance, people are uploading pictures of red mangroves, and they're labeling it as red mangroves, and the plant pathologists who are studying diseases in those organisms are able to go through this conglomerated data and say, oh, there's a leaf blight on this number of observations of red mangrove. So that's not, you know, the people who are uploading the mangroves or maybe are studying plants or something like that, but they're actually helping plant pathologists. And then lastly, a new bee-mimicking stiletto fly from China discovered on iNaturalist. And in this instance, and in the instance of the other two insects which were discovered for the first time, I can almost guarantee you that the people who uploaded those observations did not know that these were new species or did not know what they were looking at. And they might have posted it as, you know, unknown species or insects or something like that. And then someone who was in the know was able to access that picture and then literally describe a new species from iNaturalist. So it's pretty amazing, and you don't really know what information you're actually stockpiling using this system. So like if you're posting pictures of wildflowers, eventually maybe somebody, like let's say you're posting pictures of California poppy, maybe someone will want to go through all the California poppy observations and tease out, well, what insects are we seeing on these pictures of the California poppy? And it's not something that you ever meant to upload. Those observations are not set as an insect observation, but yet that data is there. And so it's one of the reasons why I feel so strongly about this is we're compiling data and we don't even know the understanding that can come out of things like this. It's basically looking with hope into the future of science. And I personally find that pretty exciting. And I myself have participated in studies through iNaturalist. I have sent seeds of a plant called Phapsi arvensis, which is the field pennycress, to someone who is studying it at the University of Illinois. I helped out with the Eight-Eyed Expedition, which was an iNaturalist focused project, which was studying spiders in the genus, I think it's Tetragnantha, which are like these spiders that They sit on blades of grass and leaves above bodies of water, and they stretch out really, really thin. Like it's hard to describe. But in any case, they were conscripting people who use iNaturalist to go out and hunt down these organisms and collect them for them so that they could continue studies. And that's on top of the CNDDB Rare Plant Project and various BioBlitzes and the City Nature Challenge. And through iNaturalist, I've been able to talk to experts. I talked to the person who wrote the treatment on Polysticum ferns, the sword ferns, the other day, and he sent me his paper. So I was able to read from the source, and normally I wouldn't have access to it because it's behind a JSTOR paywall. So essentially you'd have to pay to access that information, but because of the connection I made through iNaturalist to the author of the paper, he just sent it to me via email. And I've met people on the site and, prior to COVID, gone hiking with them and have these really lively conversations. And it's just an absolutely wonderful community. And I think that's one of the beauties of iNaturalist is that you can learn all about various organisms. It's a social networking, a social media site to some degree. So you get to meet people and talk with them and nerd out about whatever organisms really excite you. And then there's the data collection side of it. So you're actually helping science. And, the people who have these really specific expertise aren't able to be everywhere all at once. Just imagine you wanted to study something regarding ponderosa pine, for instance, in California. Think about how many places you'd have to be at any given time. If there was some sort of phenomena that relied on a certain timing, you wouldn't be able to be everywhere at once. So these citizen science projects conglomerate all of that data and allow people to get a much bigger picture into what's happening. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm pretty enamored to iNaturalist. So let's see. Oh, yeah.
ES has a question. Do people who upload their photos get credited when their data are used, especially in the case of species new to science?
That's a good question, and I'm not 100% sure on that. To me, it would be the ethical, responsible thing, I think, for any scientist to credit the person. And certainly the people whose studies I've contributed to have reached out to me personally and used my real name and actually asked me, and they even gave me the option, we can go by your iNaturalist handle if you want, but we prefer your real name. And of course, I'm willing to put my name on those things. So, but I don't necessarily think that they have to do that, especially in the case where you're looking at, say you're looking at 100,000 observations. Is it really feasible to print the names of all of those 100,000 people? Probably not. So I think it has more to do with the size of the study. If it's a new species, I think almost definitely, because you're talking about one observation. But then some of these larger picture distribution models and whatnot, it may not be the case. And certainly you do have control over your pictures as far as which copyright. And I know nothing about how copyright works, but essentially you can set it up in your profile option to make sure that the use of your photos is attributed, or you can forego that if you want.
Did they use does iNaturalist use Creative Commons levels of copyright? Do you know, Shane? Have you seen that?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Anyway,
I'm not sure.
It's nice that they take care of it. What we can not essential to know. People will find that out as they use iNaturalist.
Yeah, and if it really comes down to my ignorance of copyright laws. Certainly there's something like 20 different options that they give you, and I just don't know enough about that to really opine on it.
Yeah, okay. So iNaturalist does use Creative Commons, and Creative Commons is a worldwide, international, nonprofit based set of copyright understandings, and the copyright agreements are set up in such a way that they're consistent across media, and there are different levels, and we can have a meeting about that sometime. But the point is, you as the person who owns the material can control what level of copyright you are granting and keeping. So
That's
it's
correct.
all set up through iNaturalist. Thank you, David, for letting us know that iNaturalist uses Creative Commons. Terrific. Okay.
Yeah, and David shares, he's very prolific on iNaturalist, so I know he would know better than I. I pretty much don't care if anyone uses my photographs, so I haven't paid too much mind to it. So I do see, oh, go ahead, Chrissy.
I was going to say, I think people are really interested in the idea of, how do they get started? Like,
Absolutely.
Okay, I've taken some photos. What do I do now?
Sure. So assuming you have an account, right at the top at all times, there is the upload button. So we'll just go ahead and do an upload here. And it'll kind of show you a bit about how the process works. So I went out on a little hike today to collect some photographs. And so I have taken them and moved them from, normally I would use the app, but I want to show you how to do it on the computer here. So I went ahead and moved them onto my computer. And essentially I'm going to take these photos, select them all from the day, and it's a simple drag and drop system. So you can also select the files if you want, but I'm going to drag and drop. And so it's going to take a little bit of time for it to upload, but essentially you're going to get a screen like such. And so you can see, based on the metadata of the photographs, it has already added the location and has already added the date and the time. And so the two remaining fields, at least on this main page, are the species name and note. And so what I want to point out here is when you're uploading to iNaturalist, there's no such thing as too many pictures, but there is absolutely a thing as too few. So really, you want to take as many pictures of an organism as possible. If you're looking at a plant, you want like a picture of the flower head on from the back of the flower. You want pictures of the stem, of the leaves. You want a habitat shot. So you want to step back from the whole organism and take a picture of the entire scene, because sometimes that will also be important. And these are specifically tips for when you're looking at an organism you don't know and you would like to know. Because obviously, as you learn more and more about these plants, you sort of learn what the diagnostic features are and what information you need to photograph in order for other people who are just looking at pictures to be able to corroborate. So I bring that up because here I have two pictures of the same organism, one taken head on and one taken from the side. And so essentially what I want to do is take one of these pictures and drag it on top of the other one. And then that will combine those two photographs into one observation. And the idea with iNaturalist is one organism per post. You don't want to have a single post, like you wouldn't want to take all of these pictures and drag them onto each other and make a single post with multiple organisms, because you're attributing one species name to each post. And so if you have multiple species in the post, then that basically makes it impossible. And if you were to upload something like that, likely someone will comment on your post and ask you nicely to split that into multiple posts, which you would do using the edit feature. And so what I'm going to do, so I combine those two. These two are also the same picture. I've got a head-on shot and more of a habitat shot. This little Sierra Newt here next to it, I only have one picture of, so I'm not going to worry about that. And let's see. These two are the same organism, so I drag them together. These ones are the same organism, so I drag that together. And then lastly, I took a picture of a polystichum, a sword fern. And for polystichum, I know that there's at least 4 or 5 diagnostic factors that you need to photograph to really know which sword fern you're looking at. So I have photographed all of those things. So we're just going to add them all into one post. And so what we're left with is actually 4 observations. Oh, no, more than that. So then once you've added all the photos together, you can use these little buttons to scroll back and forth and see the different pictures. And so this one right here, we have 2 fields left over. We have the species name and we have the notes. I recommend that everyone use this notes section as if you were nature journaling. So write as much information as you can in the field in a notebook and then transpose those, because especially if you get into uploading dozens and dozens of species, you're never going to remember the specifics. Luckily, I only saw a couple, and so I do have it in my head. But what we're looking at here is a fungi, and it's growing on hardwood, which with fungi, you always want to mention the substrate that it's growing on. That without bark in mixed conifer forest. And so you could keep going. And this one specifically, I took a little sample of this home, and I'm going to look at it under the microscope, and I'm going to measure the spores, and I'm going to look at the little microscopic features of it. And so when that time comes, I'm going to actually add more pictures to this observation, and I'm going to update the notes with that information. But for the time being, I don't know what it is. I need to look at it closer to figure out. I know it's a fungi, so I could write fungi if that's all I know. But I happen to personally know that this is an ascomycete of some kind. So I'm going to put it in ascomycota. And so as you type in, it's going to give you suggestions. And just to back up a sec, one gripe about Inaturalist is you have to spell things correctly or it will not show up. And that can be very frustrating. It can also be very frustrating because the common name that you know an organism by is not one of the ones that that shows up on Inaturalist. So it really helps to kind of Google your common name and actually use the Latin name, just because then there's no confusing what you've got there. Certainly multiple plants share the same common name. So if you type in a common name that's shared by another plant, you might accidentally select the wrong plant. But getting back to this ascomycota, we have, once we type that in, you'll have this option to select ascomycota. If I wasn't 100% sure that this was the correct category here, I could just literally leave ascomycota in the text box and not select this little field right here, and that will count as a placeholder ID. And so essentially, if you leave a placeholder ID, it will look to everyone else as an unknown species, but it will give the person looking at it kind of your thoughts on what you think it might be. And you could also write in the notes section. So if you have a guess as to what it is, don't guess using the taxon pages here. Guess in your notes, and then this way you're not creating a problem, which then you have to go back and update and keep up on your notifications and make sure that you're going over everything again and double checking, which is going to happen anyway, but it'll minimize the amount you have. And so to keep moving, this next one right here, let's see. Oh, another thing, if you just click in the box, Inaturalist is going to use its image recognition to make a guess for you. And I stress that you should never trust the algorithm here, the image recognition. It's only looking at the very first picture in your observation. And like I said, a lot of times you need multiple pictures in order to know what you're looking at. And it just doesn't have the capability to do that. And especially with things like fungi, where two species will look exactly the same, but you're looking at differences in spore size, which are just a couple micrometers different, it's really unreliable. And so that's why I really suggest you go with the lowest taxa that you're absolutely sure of. But in this case, the algorithm here has said, we're pretty sure it's in this genus, Hamophila. Well, guess what? It's correct. And our top species suggestion, Hamophila umbellata, that's exactly what it is. So in this case, it was correct. But again, you kind of have to know yourself that it's correct, because a lot of the time, the top suggestion is just completely wrong.
So Shane,
yeah,
Gary has a really valid question here, and that is, say there's one species or one set of observations for one organism. Can you keep the pictures separate, get recommendations from iNaturalist for all the pictures, and then combine them if the responses are all the same? Is that a valid thing to do, or is that? Let
me ask for clarification. Do you mean like when I was combining all of the photographs, I took multiple pictures of the same individual organism? Are you saying to run the image recognition on each individual picture and then combine them if the image recognition?
It's a good question.
Yeah. I would say you can do that, and it might actually give you a little bit of guidance as far as narrowing down what you're looking at. But it does, just because it recognizes and says it's the same over multiple pictures, does not mean that it's correct. Does not mean that it's made the correct distinction. So sometimes if I'm really lost, I'll actually look at the iNaturalist suggestions, and maybe it doesn't get the species right, but it puts me in a family that I wasn't familiar with. And so then I could go off on my own and narrow things down a little bit for myself instead of looking at the whole of plant life when I'm trying to figure out, what I've taken a picture of.
And also, it also spells it correctly. So if you know the genus but don't know how to spell it,
that's correct. Yeah,
you could ask it, and you'd at least get the genus name spelled correctly.
Yeah, but then like other times it'll be completely off. So it'll look at, like, for instance, I uploaded a mushroom today and it was like, you have a beetle. And I was like, no, it's a mushroom. It's definitely not a beetle. So it can be really far off too. So yeah, it's good to, and I should mention, I have a setting on right now where the scientific name shows up first, but by default, the common names show up first. So you setting up a new account will be seeing somewhat of a different setup than my account. And I just much prefer the binomials to the common names. So I have that option selected, and that's in the profile options if you wanted to do that. So what I did want to say is that when it's looking at when it's making a guess, it's taking a visual similarity, as you can see here, and also looking at the location. So this species has been seen nearby, but also there's the Hamophila menziesii, which has also been seen nearby, and they do, obviously they're the same genus, they look a lot alike. So if you were looking at this and you were pretty sure it was a Hamophila, but you didn't quite know the difference between Hamophila umbellata and Hamophila menziesii, you can just enter in the genus. It's fine. And then someone will say, oh, that's Hamophila umbellata, and then you can just agree with them. There's no rush with these kinds of things. Well, one thing I think to be sure is that iNaturalist is not offering instant gratification. I get identifications on things that have been sitting as unknown for a year and a half sometimes. And then somebody finds it, and then they finally get to it, and they finally identify it. So you can't expect them the image recognition to work, or for people to necessarily find your observation immediately and identify it. So it's a little bit, but I mean, that's very much like naturalism in general. You might be out in the field and you might see this plant that I saw today, this Hamophila, and not know what it is. And if you're going to go and look through, like, say, a Jepson manual and run the key, you're going to have to wait for there to be flowers. And so you're going to have to come back to that in order to actually identify it using the traditional route. So it's not, these sciences require patience to a certain degree. And certainly, if I were to see a picture of this, I would be able to identify it as being Hamophila. And so here we have a Sierra Newt. Let's see just for the heck of it, let's see what the suggestion is. I bet you this one will be pretty good. And it just takes a little bit. The app is actually a little faster with this, which is why I do most of my uploading on the app. One thing while this is loading, I should notice, if you're someone who has been really devoted to, like, say, Flickr, and you upload a lot of pictures of plants and insects and butterflies and stuff to Flickr, you can import all of those pictures from Flickr into Inaturalist, and it should have the metadata, and it should, you know, upload all of this stuff for you, and you have to do the same exact thing where you enter in the species name and fill out any notes. And so, yeah, again, it comes with the genus, Taraca, I think, is that Taraca, however you pronounce that. I'm not an amphibian person, but I do know this is the Sierra newt. It's got a lighter jaw line, essentially, than the California newt, and plus where it was seen in the Sierras. And just to move on a little bit faster, we have the rattlesnake plantain here, a rattlesnake orchid, which is Goodyeara oblongifolia. And so if I were to just type it in right here and not wait for the suggestions to pop up, it's only going to count itself as a placeholder. You actually have to click the suggestion each time. And then here we have a Xylaria, hypoxylon. Wow, I can't spell today. This is the candle snuff fungus. And then lastly, Polysticum imbricans. Which is the narrowleaf sword fern. So now that I've got that filled out, there's a couple other things I have the option to do, which is over on the sidebar here to the left. You can fill out the notes in this section. You can change the location. Right now it's set as public, and so anyone can see this location. You can also set it and obscure the location, in which case it'll show up on the map, but it'll be in a polygon, and so you will not reveal the exact location. I use this obscured function when I find forageable mushrooms, because if I just put out where this lion's mane is, the next time I go back, it'll be gone. So someone will use my observation to go take that mushroom out of the environment. So I will obscure it on occasion, and then private means it doesn't show up on the map at all. It still exists for data. You can actually give the location to specific people that ask. And if you do find a rare species and it's identified as a rare species, Inaturalist automatically obscures it. So you don't have to worry about accidentally uploading a rare species and putting that rare species at danger of being poached or something like that. So for this case, I'm going to leave it as public. If you had photographed a plant in a garden or landscaping, let's say, you would want to click this option, which says captive or cultivated. Generally, captive and cultivated organisms are not exactly what Inaturalist is for. There's nothing stopping you from uploading them, I suppose, but it's not really for like identifying the variety of rows you have in your garden or something like that. It's really for wild organisms first and foremost. And that said, if there's a weed in your garden, that's actually really good information. I post a lot of insects and mushrooms and fungus that show up in my garden, but I don't post the planted Douglas iris I have. You know, I wouldn't post my lavender plant, for instance. So these are all wild organisms. You can also add tags, and you can add these to various projects. We're going to get into projects in a little bit, but for the sake of explaining it a little bit, projects are ways of organizing the Inaturalist data for a specific purpose. So for instance, those of you who are familiar with the Yuba Watershed Institute's fungal foray in December, they actually use an Inaturalist project to keep track of what people are finding year over year. And there are other ones. There's a project for every single trail operated by the Bear Yuba Land Trust. And there's a couple different kinds of projects, but again, we'll get into that in a second. And the very last one is field. And so these are really interesting because there are something like 50,000 different options that you can put in here, and you can see the view the field options if you wanted to go through and find some, and you can even add your own. The cool thing about this is, like, if you wanted to use iNaturalist and study something yourself, you could actually make your own field description. So you could say like you're looking at an organism, like you're looking at madrones or something, and you're like, I want to know which madrones have leaf minors. You can write like leaf minor present or not present and make those field options, and then use that to further refine your data over time. And tags, I don't actually really know the use of tags on iNaturalist, and I haven't really used them before, but I assume it works similarly to other social media channels in the sense that, like, you could probably search through the data for specific tags. So if you tagged it as like, you know, I don't even know, mosses of Nevada County or something like that, then you'd be able to search what are the observations that have that tag. So I think it's probably, and again, I'm not 100% sure, it's probably like an informal project. But in any case, moving on, we are going to just submit these observations at this time, and we'll show you a bit about what that looks like.
While we're waiting for those to upload, Shane, and you know, all of that, Kimberly asks a question: is there a place on the website that the botanical characteristics of the plant show up? I'm not quite sure what that means, but maybe you can maybe there's a clear answer that doesn't require her to give us the answer, but you can show us whether there is or isn't any information about botanical characteristics of the plants that are identified.
No, is the short answer. Basically, if you were to click on a taxon page, which actually that was going to be my next step here, it gives you resources to check out, like things like Wikipedia and such. And I'm going to have to ask to pause because I forgot to plug in my computer and it's about to die on me. So give me 1 second here. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. So yeah, you can quickly link to Wikipedia descriptions and that kind of thing. But ultimately, you'll probably want to pull up a tab and go to CalFlora or the eJepson page, or pull out one of your books like I have behind me and get to the information that way. What iNaturalist does have that's really robust is the taxonomic relationships between plants. And I'm going to show a bit about how that looks too. So you can actually explore the tree of life. And so it concentrates much more on taxonomy in the relationships between different species than the actual morphological information about any given organism. I hope that answers the question.
I thought that does give people a really good idea, and boy, am I looking forward to seeing that the taxonomic relationships view of this. That sounds terrific. While we're waiting for the upload. Oh
yeah. I mean, I can also, do we have more questions? Because I can just move to another tab. I kind of anticipated this taking
go ahead and move to another tab. We can ask the questions afterwards.
Sure. Well, I want to show you what it looks like once what an observation page looks like, and the process of identifying something and or disagreeing with something. It's just going to take a second here to load. And so I found this observation because I was looking at all of the Arbutus menziesii, which is the Pacific madrone tree, and I see one pin, and it's way far away from all of the others on the map. And it is in the middle of southern Arizona. And so I clicked on that because that seemed strange to me. And sure enough, this was identified here by B. Bell as Arbutus menziesii, and the uploader corroborated it. And so it was a research grade Arbutus menziesii. And then I disagreed, saying it was something in the genus Arbutus clearly, but doesn't seem right for menziesii. And with a little bit of research, determined that it was Arbutus arizonica, which makes sense for being in Arizona. So then I suggested an ID and wrote that in, and the original people ended up withdrawing their IDs, and a couple more people came in to corroborate that this is indeed Arbutus arizonica. And so now it's a research grade observation of Arbutus arizonica. And essentially, down at the bottom here, you can type in just a comment, or you can suggest an identification. And let's say I was disagreeing, and really I should have done this, and I'm usually pretty good about this. For whatever reason, I didn't this time. But there's also a comment field, so you can say, it says right here, tell us why. So I could say it's out of the range of Arbutus menziesii, and at this point I've forgotten the characteristics specifically that split them up in the flora of North American key. But I could point to some of the other things. So like, for instance, if someone had posted, there's southern mountain misery in Nevada County, I would say no and explain why it is. And sometimes this isn't used as much as I would like, as far as people disagreeing and not explaining why, but a lot of people will just comment and say, why do you disagree? So it basically starts the conversation there. And yeah, so moving on. Sorry, the share thing is blocking me. Mm-hmm. One of the other features I think is pretty cool is the calendar page. And this is one way of seeing all of your use of the site over time. And so you can see every one of these dates that's a hyperlink is a day that I used iNaturalist over the past year. You can see I had a very busy May and June, using it practically every day in those 2 months. And so you can look at your usage over time. And then we wanted to talk about the taxa info. So why don't we go there next? In the meantime, do we have any more questions, Chrissy?
Just a second. There are a couple of, let me get to a really basic question here.
Yeah.
And that really basic question is, can you talk a little bit about what's important to include in a photograph that where you're looking for an ID, where you don't know what the species is?
Okay. Yeah. Well, actually, in preparation for that, I took some pictures today, which are probably the two most commonly ignored kinds of uploads on iNaturalist. So I'll pull those up real quick.
If you were going to do that later, it's fine. You know.
There's really, I'm going off the seat of my pants here, so we'll jump around. That's totally fine. I'm happy to stick around as long as people have questions too. So I'm sure we'll get to everything. So I took this picture today, and you see this every once in a while. Someone takes a picture of just the woods, pretty much. And, you know, as you can see, there's multiple organisms in this picture, you know, so we wouldn't know what they were even looking for here. Maybe they would have in the notes, you know, little tree in the foreground, but it's so far back that you can't really tell what it is necessarily. You can make a guess at best, but maybe they mean this big tree in the back. Maybe they mean these pines over here. So this is kind of really hard to work with. So if you want it, let's say you're the person who took this picture, but you really want to know what that tree is in the front. This is a fine picture to include, but you also want to get right up close to the tree. And you want to take a picture of the bark and the leaves and any cones or acorns or fruits that you can find. Just generally include as much context as possible. So that's oh, we were going to say something.
Nope.
Anyway, so that's one example of a pretty common upload, which will just sit there and nobody will interact with. And this is the other kind, which is essentially just like an extremely, oh, I'm waiting for the delay here, an extremely blurry picture where you can't make out anything. A lot of the times people are taking pictures of, say, a wildflower, and the camera focuses on the ground behind the flower, and the flower itself is completely out of focus. And so if you're uploading photos like that, nobody's going to know what to do with that. We're not going to know how to make heads or tails of it. So it's likely to be ignored. So I think it's really good to check your photos in the field. It's happened to me dozens of times where I've taken a picture, especially of, like, say, a fungi in low light conditions, and it's come out really blurry. And I'll just have to shrug and say, oh, well, I'm not going to upload that one. And maybe I'll go back to it. Maybe I'll rephotograph it tomorrow or something like that, if that's possible. But if you know you can't get back to it and you're really, really curious, just check your photos in the field and make sure they're really clear. This, by the way, is a Cladonia lichen. Not that anyone could tell, but it was really fun to take that picture. And generally, you know, over time, from interacting, you'll learn what you need to include. If we were to go back to, you know, I'm over 7,000 observations at this point. If we were to go back to some of my first uploads, there's a picture of, like, the first couple leaves of a thistle, and no one's going to be able to know what that is besides that it's a thistle. And you learn over time, like, oh, that's not worth photographing. No one's going to, I don't have enough information available to me in the field to even photograph. And so it's about tempering expectations and not expecting, you know, every single thing you upload to get an ID. Oh, almost forgot. For the people here who are interested in birds, you don't necessarily need a photo. You can actually upload just audio of bird calls as well. And there are people who will be able to identify the birds from the calls a lot of the time. So don't want to, yes.
Oh, I was going to say, when you're done with that, that's okay.
I'm done.
No,
yeah.
No, go ahead. I can ask.
Okay. Sure. So I want to show the taxa page. We're at taxa info, inaturalist.org/taxa. And I'm going to just kind of roll through and show a bit of what it looks like. So we're doing a presentation here for the Native Plant Society. So let's look at plants. So clicking on the Kingdom Plantae will bring up another page, which is going to load. And it will show some pictures, and it will give you some stats. Who's seen the most amount of plants on iNaturalist? Who's identified the most amount of plants? When was the last observation seen? How many total observations are there? 12 million. So quite a lot of plants all around the world. And I'll show you some highlights of the pictures from that taxa. And then if you go down, it'll show some children underneath that. So below the kingdom, we have phylums. And so these are all the phylums that are in the plant kingdom. And so we'll click on Tracheophyta, the vascular plant. And you can just keep, I mean, going up and down. It's like getting lost in a Wikipedia wormhole in a way. Like you can really get lost in these taxonomic trees for quite a long time. So here are the classes below the phylum, and including the subphylum Angiospermae, which we're going to click on. And from here we have our monocots and our dicots. And now we're at the order level. So I don't know. Let's do apiales just to make it interesting. So that is like carrots and ivies and allies. Oh, I clicked the wrong one. So let's go back up. You can also climb back up. All right. Apiales. So let's do family Apiaceae then, right? Wow, my internet's being very slow right now. It's probably because I'm streaming on 2 devices right now, so I could share my screen. So I apologize. In any case, this is probably, I don't need to go down, but eventually you'll reach the species level and the genus level, and you can see the whole taxonomic tree, and it just explore the different relationships. And it also mentions how many observations there are of each of these. So yeah, family Apiaceae. I don't know, what's a good Apiaceae genus in California that I can get to really fast? Am I even in the right one? Oh yeah. Oh, I'm in the wrong subfamily, that's why. I'd have to go all the way down to Senicula to find one. Okay, in any case, you could just get lost in this. There's so much biodiversity on this planet. So absolutely, if you're interested in the, phylogenetic relationships between plants, this is a really good place to hunt through. And you can see, if we went back up to the top, now we get all of those stats about whatever level we're currently at. And you also get cool things like, here's the seasonality. So here's when people are seeing different plants and Apiaceae. You can see the history, which is essentially over time, so each year. And you can see this is basically the pattern that shows up for every single one of these, because as there's more and more people using iNaturalist, there's naturally going to be more and more observations over time. And then several of the species in this family are dioecious, so they're separate male and female individuals. So you have the option to actually type in the sex of, and so you can keep track of that. Oh, maybe there are no dioecious ones in this family. And then lastly, phonology. So phonology is just the timing of various plant phenomena. So the red line here is they're flowering, and the blue line, which is not even showing, is fruiting and flower budding. And so these are just more levels of data that you can put onto your observation. And someone could studying, how is climate change affecting the fruiting times of Daucus species, for instance. And they would have that information so long as you're providing them with the phonology information. So it's just really, there's probably too much on this site to go over in one meeting, and this is meant to be more of an intro and an introduction. So I'll gloss over it a bit and just move on to something else. I do want to mention that at the end of every year, iNaturalist gives you these breakdowns of what you've done and what you've seen each year in a really appealing fashion. And so this is their year in review section. And so you get like a nice little collage of the pictures you took this year. And you can scroll down and see just how many observations of how many species and how many identifications you've made and see them spread out by date, and you can see them spread out by year after year. So like, how much did you see this year versus last year? And then there's a map which shows you where you took your observations by the week. So this is like each week in my iNaturalist use, like where I was, and it's pretty cool to reflect upon the past year that way. And then there's your most popular observations, which had the most amount of favorites and comments. Which the creeping Mahonia at the top was me getting into a really long conversation with somebody who has a pet theory about Berberis species and how they're in need of work. And I was picking his brain about it, and he made a lot of sense. So it was a really interesting conversation. That's the kind of thing you get through iNaturalist. And then lastly, some information about IDs, who I identified the most for, and who helped me the most. Thank you, Thea, for identifying my mushroom photographs for me. And all right, so from here, I would like to talk about pretty much just one more section, unless there's other questions, and that's the projects. The projects are, so you're able to sort all this data on the Explore page. You can look by taxon, so I can look at just Arbutus. I can look at just Nevada County. I can look at California as a whole. There's all of these filters to really parse through that data. But projects are a little different, and it allows you to essentially compile groups of information that those parameters don't really allow simply. And so there's three kinds of projects, and I really only understand two of them, to be quite honest. There's the traditional project, and that's how it started on iNaturalist, how it was until recently. And essentially, as you make an observation, you have to, on the upload page, manually add your observation to that project. And then the other kind are called collection projects, I believe is the name for them. And those ones automatically add your observation into a project if they qualify for different parameters. And so you can search, there's projects on so many different things. There's like, based on like a specific location, like the invasive plants of Tahoe National Forest, or, there's just, the possibilities are really endless. But recently, and I really want to invite everyone who may be using iNaturalist or may consider using iNaturalist to join these projects. We have 4 new Redbud iNaturalist projects, and I'm just going to show you the first one because of how long it's taking to load, and then explain the other ones. But essentially, this is a master project we're calling the Plants of Placer Nevada Counties. And now I could use the Explore feature to look at Placer County, and I could use it to look at Nevada County, but I couldn't combine those two into one data set without using a project. And so this basically allows us to track the plants which people are reporting on iNaturalist in our chapter area. And so already, I started this yesterday, and because it's a collections project rather, and it pulls in things automatically, which are just Kingdom Plantae in Nevada County and Placer County that have a photo. Those are the parameters I set up. And so thus far in the history of iNaturalist, there's 56,000 observations of 2,300 species, which means there's probably about 700 species existing in our 2 counties, which are not on iNaturalist yet. Like nobody has uploaded an identifier. And so then we're able to go and look at these and identify them and really help our local chapter members who join this project get their plants identified. And then we'll be able to, who knows what we'll be able to do with this data in the future. Our chapter is right now undergoing a study, or helping undergo a study of Fremontodendron decumbens and Californicum, and the weird population of suspected decumbens in Grass Valley, which kind of has intermediate characteristics based on the key factors. And so we were able to use iNaturalist to figure out where are Fremontodendron growing in Nevada and Placer counties, and where should we go look for populations, so that when we want to do genetic testing and morphological studies of that next year, we don't have to, trudge through, tens of thousands of acres in order to find them. We have some leads to begin with. And it will also give us some information about what's the most observed species, which seems to be the Sierra juniper. Although this is not this is obviously not one for one on what occurs most, because there's a bias. What are people uploading? Certainly snow plant is high up there because a lot of people see this big red, tiny red plant, and they go, what is that? I should put it on iNaturalist. And so it gets over represented in this data set, but it's still really interesting information. And so we have the plants. We also have the graminoids. So we're going to be trying to keep track of what are the grasses, the sedges, the rushes that grow in our two counties. What are the ferns that grow in our two counties? And what are the bryophytes, defined loosely as mosses, liverworts, and hornworts. And so as people upload things, and they might not even know about the project, they could just be passing through and they upload something to iNaturalist that fits in one of those categories, it'll automatically get added. And I'm hoping that going forward, these projects will present all sorts of really interesting ideas and problems in the math problem sense for us to start working on. So, if you have an iNaturalist account, please look for those projects and join. Certainly, a lot of those items are in need of ID. In general, iNaturalist has far more people who upload observations than who can identify plants. And certainly, I know a lot of people who don't upload anything, but they're really good at plant identification, and that's all they do is just go in here and identify things for people. We need a lot more identification help. So if you do know your plants, please come help identify plants. That's sorely needed on this platform.
Shane, here's a question. Apropos the projects that you're talking about here for Redbud in terms of identifying the plants of our two counties. And that is, there's the large question of what is a local native, and there's some people use CalFlora, some people use CalScape as ways to figure out if a particular species is local to where they live or the area where they're going to be planting. And my question is, to what extent do you feel that the work of these projects here in iNaturalist is also a valid tool for doing that kind of evaluation when you're trying to think about which species are local to our counties, and or using iNaturalist as a way to identify which species are local to some part of a county?
I think it's beneficial but imperfect compared to the data that CalFlora and CalScape are using. So those are typically using herbarium specimens. CalFlora also has like an iNaturalist-like observer feature as well. But there's the saying, like, a plant without a voucher is just a rumor. These are basically pictorial rumors. So essentially, it's really easy to misidentify from a picture. And science is so reliant on peer review that with an herbarium specimen, someone could misidentify even an herbarium specimen, and then some future person could look at that same specimen and say, no, they made a mistake, and the material's there. A picture is just a snapshot in time. So it's flawed as far as using that. That said, it's really useful in the sense that, like, I can look at very small areas. Like I can look at what plants are in the Yuba watershed alone, or what's in this one park. You'd be surprised the locations that they've actually laid out and designated as places of interest. And so it's useful. One of the things I will do on iNaturalist is if I'm traveling somewhere and I'm totally unfamiliar with the plants, like let's say I'm in the Mojave Desert and I'm just like, I don't know anything that I'm looking at. I might be able to tell families, but I have no experience with those plants. I could look on iNaturalist at the location where I'm planning on going and look at what other people have seen and kind of get some ideas ahead of time. And then when I'm out there, I might go, oh, that's that plant that I saw on iNaturalist. I know what that is already. Or, you know, it kind of gives you a better idea. And so in a sense, it does help, but it's not as thorough as those other sources, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so having gone over projects, I don't think, oh, I have one more thing to talk about, which is just another story about the opportunities that arise through iNaturalist. And so I was doing a plant survey for the Bear Yuba Land Trust and happened to see this scene next to me, and I thought, oh man, look, there, that, I don't know how, here, maybe I can blow it up. That lizard is eating that other lizard. And was very careful to kind of tiptoe up and managed to snap a picture of it, upload it to iNaturalist, and I just wrote in the notes like mating question mark, because that was the only other thing I could think of. And I was contacted by the director of herpetology from the Natural History Museum of LA County. And he said that this picture was, he was studying the mating habits of alligator lizards, and they had heard about them being up in the vegetation, like this picture shows, but pictures of like showing that were really rare. And so he asked if he could use this data in his studies, and also if he could use this photo in some of the promotional materials for the work that they do in the herpetology department down there, to which, of course, I am absolutely agreed to. But yeah, so I just happened to be hiking one day, and now my pictures are, you know, in some brochure for the herpetology department. And I always like to share that story because it was like the first time that for me that iNaturalist's activities crossed over kind of into the real world for me. And I felt like I actually was contributing something. And this was after about a year of having my account when this happened. So beyond that, I'm happy to take more questions. If there's another feature I kind of glossed over, or you want me to go into more detail on, I'm more than happy to. It's kind of hard covering all that this site offers in a short time period while also being concise and timely. So yeah, any questions?
Well, I think that we've gotten several questions about how to align your location with, you know, with putting location data into iNaturalist. Someone asks, what if you took a picture with a camera that doesn't have GPS? Can you enter a location separately from the GPS location? That's one question. There are several on location, but let's start with that one. Let me not overwhelm you,
Sure.
Shane.
Yeah, you can absolutely do it that way. So it's really helpful to have that metadata because it automatically sets your pin exactly where you were. But even when you're using your phone, occasionally you're in an area where you have poor service and it does not register the location. And so you would have to go and enter in the location manually. And if you're not 100% sure, there's ways of adjusting the accuracy of your pin. So you could say, you know, within 20,000 meters of this general area, if you don't remember exactly. You can draw a pretty big swath, actually. I accidentally entered one time where it basically showed up for everyone. It's like, I found this somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. It was that big of a polygon, which was an error on my part. And the only thing to watch out for is to definitely double check your observations, because I've had things even with the metadata put an observation in the wrong place. For instance, I found a calochordus, a Mariposa lily in the Reno area, and it placed that species right about at Donner Pass, which I thought, I didn't think to check the metadata. And of course, if you know the plant communities, that was like, somebody found it eventually, and they were like, that's a really weird location for that plant. And when I reviewed it, I discovered that there had been some kind of bug or an error, and it had placed it in the wrong section. But luckily, I remembered where I had seen it, so I was able to fix it, and not really a big deal.
Okay, so thank you, Shane. Here's another location question. I think this one. Okay. Anyway, can the app read the photo metadata to retrieve the location automatically? I always seem to have to zoom in on the map to specify the location, says this person.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, unless you have poor service, I've found it to be really reliable. And what I do is, because I'm often going out for long trips, and iNaturalist will absolutely drain your battery if you're using the app in the field. So I tend to just take pictures using my phone camera and then upload them when I get home that night, or the next day even, or a few days later.
And then when you do that, the location data is present, as we saw when you did that demonstration. The location data are attached to the photo when you do the upload.
That's correct, yeah. Unless you have, again, there's a couple caveats. If you have location services turned off, it might not work. Or it won't work, I should say. If you're in an area, like I will go sometimes into the High Sierra and take pictures and come home and there's no location, no metadata, because I didn't have enough service. So that can happen, and you just have to enter it in manually after the fact. It's a little annoying to have to deal with, but what I tend to do is just lower my accuracy at that point. So I'm not like setting a pin on a map. I'm making like a polygon, and it's somewhere in here. That tends to work for me. And you should be able to do that so long as you remember where you took the picture. I would recommend, if you don't remember where, not uploading that one to iNaturalist, because it's not going to make it into research grade without a location.
And you can copy once you've created the polygon for one photo and you took multiple photos in that same location, you can copy that location information from one photo to the next?
Well, you can on the website, but not on the app.
Okay.
Yeah, so the way we had it on the website here, where there were the different boxes, you can just copy and paste the GPS coordinates that way. But if you're using the app, you'd have to set it individually, because only one observation takes up the screen at a given time. And I wish I could share my screen and show you a bit around the app as well. I actually tend to use the app a little bit more because I don't like to be on my laptop so much. But then I have to switch to the laptop when I really want to get into data aggregation and less just exploring things on iNaturalist.
Okay, yeah, David, your friend who does a lot of iNaturalist contribution, says if your location field is blank, it means your photograph does not have geotagging enabled. That's a setting you control on your phone. So we'll all have to look at that. Okay. Okay. And there has been, someone wants to know how to upload, if you have photos in iNaturalist, how would you upload them to CalFlora if you wanted to? Is there an easy way to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. You would do that through CalFlora. And essentially, you would have an account on both services, and you go to CalFlora, and I think on the sidebar it says like add observations, and one of the options on that add observations page is add observations from iNaturalist. And in which case, once you're there, you just type in your username, and it gives you all of the, just like you're doing an observation on Calflora proper, it'll show you all of those items, and then you just click publish next to each one. Sometimes they will not let you upload rare plants, though. That's the only thing I've noticed, which is probably for the better.
That's
good.
the
one caveat.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can see David shared the link there.
Okay, that sounds great. Let's see here. There's a question, as long as we're talking about, interoperability between various apps. Someone asked earlier, posted the question, does iSeek interact with iNaturalist? Does iSeek become more informed as iNaturalist becomes more developed? You should tell people what iSeek. Yeah. Oh, 1 second before you get started, Shane. Yeah. You should tell people what iSeek is, just to make sure.
I believe it's just Seek. I could be wrong about that. I think it's Seek, but it's basically they're the same company, Seek and iNaturalist. Seek is a identification only app. It's just an app. It's not a website. It uses the same algorithm and utilizes the iNaturalist data set, but it works more like those other apps like PlantSnap and Picture This and Google Lens, coupled, and why Seek is actually superior to those, coupled with your location. So essentially, it will give you results based on the image recognition, plus like these are the plants which will be found in your area. So it can narrow it down a little better. I had done a test of all of those different apps with really common plants, and none of them are perfect, but Seek is definitely the one that works the best, I have to say. And I'm planning on redoing that because it's, got to redo your experiments. So look for that, CNPS Facebook forum.
Particularly as you're as what you're evaluating evolves. And evolution is faster in the app world than it is in the plant world.
Yeah, it was close to a year ago now that I did that. So maybe they've released updates, and any one of those apps could have improved their algorithm over time, or just from people adding more and more data to their system. So it's worth trying again. Maybe the landscape has changed.
Someone has had the experience of when typing in a name, it's like you type in a name, and iNaturalist says it's something that says something else that this person says isn't even in Jepson, and it changes your name. Have you ever had a frustrating experience with iNaturalist that you'd like to share with the class, Shane? And how one might handle it?
Yes. So I've definitely had that happen to me. I wouldn't say it's frustrating, but that's perhaps because I know what's happening. And that's that iNaturalist doesn't use Jepson conventions. It doesn't treat Jepson as a particular authority on our plants. It's actually using I believe it's the Q's Plants of the World Online for their taxonomy. But then there's deviations from that. So like iNaturalist has like its own, and I could be totally misexplaining this, but this is how I understand it anyway. It uses the Plants of the World Online taxonomic structure, and then they make specific deviations on iNaturalist to kind of move away from it and encompass a little bit more. So then you'll find things that are where Jepson says it's one name and the Plants of the World Online says it's a different name. And ultimately, if you want to identify it on iNaturalist, you've got to go with Plants of the World Online. And I think that phenomena itself, and why I don't find it frustrating, is one of the things that actually led me to get even nerdier about plants and start reading about why is there a difference? I started to read taxonomic papers because I wanted to know, why is this Acmaspon nevadensis in Jepson, but Acmaspon decumbens on iNaturalist, and deciding for myself, because really you can kind of choose which taxonomic model you think makes sense, but you do have to use the iNaturalist taxonomic model in order to actually put something on there. And so what I'll do in that instance is, to use the same example, I have Acnosmon nevadensis as it appears in Jepson. I'll mark it down as Acnosmon decumbens, and then in the notes, I'll write synonym Acnosmon nevadensis so that I know to look for that again.
So here's a related question that no one else has asked, but it occurs to me, and that is, oh gosh, what happens on iNaturalist when plant names get updated in the botanical world?
Yeah, good question. It automatically, if a name changes and iNaturalist curators accept that name, it will automatically change it for you. I'm trying to think of an example, but nothing's coming to me. But yeah, so like, Cynoglossum. I was putting everything as Cynoglossum grande for the Pacific houndstone, and then I changed it to Adelinea grande. So I didn't have to go in and do anything. But if I were to go back to my Cynoglossum, it would have a strike through of the name, and it would say taxon invalid or something like that. And it will automatically add the updated taxon for you.
So if you go looking for something that used to be correct, it will take you to a result that says, yeah, that name isn't valid anymore, but here's the new name, and it will give you a link to it. So it doesn't just leave you hanging.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure of that anyway.
Okay.
I know for a lot of, like when there's an update, so like, let's say you weren't aware, I mean, who could follow all of the name changes all of the time? Oh, do you lose me?
We don't see you now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'll just talk then.
Okay.
I think it's my internet connection. So where was I? Oh yeah, so if you typed in Cynoglossum grande, it should automatically show you Adelinea grande.
Perfect. Okay. I think the only other question, unless if I missed any question, if somebody could just retype it at the bottom, but I think that we've covered all the questions. I think there has been an interesting little thread that's gone on in the chat about the best way for citizen science, including iNaturalist, to inform the databases that get used for projects such as, environmental impact reports, biological inventories for private and public projects. Do you have any insights on that? There were some really good responses in the chat, so I think that was.
So are they asking like how could this information help those kinds of pursuits?
First of all, is are professional private biologists using iNaturalist or CalFlora more now?
I would say yes, they are. I think there's certainly a reluctance among some of the older school types. But more and more over time are using it and finding out why it can be beneficial to them. And really, it's just a tool that you can adapt to your particular passions and interests and needs. One thing, I really think it should be used more by conservationists and by teachers. iNaturalist even has a teacher's guide. That if you wanted to incorporate iNaturalist into your classroom, they give recommendations on how best to use iNaturalist for those purposes. And I mean, I see a lot of benefit that could come from it. I mean, you could spend the winter time looking through iNaturalist. Like, let's say you worked at a certain property, you just look at what people had been posting all year long, and maybe somebody found a plant that you'd never seen there before. I know, like, one I can think of is Farthen Felix, who works as a botanist up at the Sagehen Field Station. She's one of the most prolific iNaturalist users, I mean, full stop. And she catalogs everything she sees in the stagehand area and the larger like Truckee Basin. And I think, she could probably answer the question better than I, who I'm using it for largely my own, increasing my own understanding, and then also being able to put that information out there for anybody's use. But yeah, I do see a lot of potential. I think there's probably a lot of creativity that could come out of having this tool that people working in those fields could absolutely utilize.
Thank you, Shane. Let's see. Amber's question was about iNaturalist and CNDDB. Someone was helping me understand, or helping us understand. Pardon me. So generally, biologists would run a CNDDB report to see what's potential and then do surveys on the site. So the question is, to what extent do you happen to have any insights on whether biologists, so they run the CNDDB report to see what's potential. Do they also look at iNaturalist and look at the data that iNaturalist report? People report on iNaturalist about what's present at a particular site in a particular location, or in the vicinity of a particular location before doing the survey on site. So they'll be alert to possible rare plants or other relevant species.
I'm not sure if they are doing that. And I do think that they should, although there's limited benefit to that because of the obscurity of rare plants on iNaturalist. That you essentially, if it shows up, I think, I could be wrong with the number, but I think it's like if it's within 30 kilometers or 50 kilometers, it'll show up in a search because of the obscuring. So you won't know exactly where that rare plant is from using iNaturalist. Although if it does show up in your search, you could contact the person who uploaded it and ask them for specific coordinates, which I have been contacted by CNDDB and asked, where did you find that? And that will certainly help them. And, you could look for other clues like plant communities or habitat. So like, if you're looking for the, what is it? It's a Cypripedium californicum, which grows in like seeps and serpentine areas. Like if you're seeing other serpentine plants and you take that over and you see there's a riparian area going through it, maybe there's that orchid. So I think there's benefits to it. Certainly, there was one day where I was just browsing like I normally do on iNaturalist, looking at unknown species in Nevada County, and I see this plant, which I instantly recognized because myself, Thea Chesney, and Hannah Kang were out the previous weekend making a collection of it. And it's a rare plant called Streptanthus tortuosus truei, which is the true's jewel flower. And it only grows in this one little section of the middle Yuba Fork River. And it looks like the mountain jewel flower, but it's a little bit more yellowish. The sepals are longer than the petals. And I think there's a couple other characteristics now that I'm forgetting. But it looked exactly the same, except this one was found in the South Yuba Canyon. And so I contacted the person and I was like, hi, I think you found this rare species. Would you mind if I went to go look at it? Is your location information accurate? And she replied and thought that was really exciting and said, yes, it was accurate, and even gave me more specific advice on how to find it. And we all went out there and confirmed that, yes, this was a new population of this rare plant, about maybe 30 miles away from the only place it was known to grow. And because Hannah has the proper permits, so we were able to make a collection of it and document it. And so we were able to make a range extension simply just because I was, browsing iNaturalist at like 11 p.m. in bed or something one night. So yeah, I mean, it can certainly help find new populations of rare plants. The people who are uploading a lot of the time don't know what they're uploading. They're just like, oh, that's an interesting plant. And then it's up to the people with a little bit of knowledge to parse through those 55 million observations and kind of pay no attention to the Himalayan blackberry ones and find the really cool ones like the jewel flower I described, or the bombus and the fly that we saw on those scientific papers. Yeah, and David brought up, there is a CNDDB project. So mentioning the products before, there's a CNDDB specific project where you can release you can basically give them permission to get exact coordinates of rare plants. But oftentimes they'll even reach out to you, which was the case with me. I wasn't aware of their project. They found me.
Ah, okay. And thank you, David. Okay, so David has shared with me, because I asked him, because I don't know these things, that the CNDDB is the California Natural Diversity Database. So now that's one more thing we have learned from this evening to complement everything we've learned about iNaturalist. Thank you so much. Okay.
Absolutely.
Shane.
Do we have any more questions, or are we wrapping up here?
I think we're wrapping up here.
Well, that was almost 2 hours. So, yeah.
Do you feel pretty comfortable about, privacy is usually something that people think about, when they sign up for an app that's both on their phone and on their laptop, and you feel comfortable with iNaturalist in this regard, Shane?
Oh, yeah. I'm a pretty big proponent of information being in the hands of people. I'm a big proponent of access to wildlands for people. I think that that's exactly how people have a larger reverence for these things that we all obviously care about. I think that's how you get new people interested in protecting plants, is you just kind of put stuff out there. And the like JSTOR model and the scientific journal model of like putting all that really valuable information behind paywalls. Like, I understand it takes a lot of effort and energy to produce, but what good does it do if nobody sees it? And so personally, like I could really care less about the part, like I was mentioning before, if people take my photographs off of iNaturalist, if that's possible, which I don't care much. If they're engaging the data, I think that's cool. That's pretty much where I stand on that. I haven't heard of any privacy concerns with iNaturalist specifically. And certainly if you go into the profile options, there's a bunch of little, check boxes. You can affect all of that as far as, the emails you get and the copyright of uploading your photos. And I'm pretty sure they're on top of that kind of stuff, on top of that kind of thing.
That's terrific. I'm looking forward to doing this and learning more. I have a little folder under native plants in my photos application, and it's called like unidentified.
Yeah,
so
put them on iNat.
Assuming that I have location data for them, I can hardly wait. Okay, and I'm sure I'm far from the only person. And now I can hardly wait to go on another hike and find plants that I can't identify on my own, and I'll be sure to have the location data. And I'm sure I speak for all of us in saying, you've given us something that we can be doing now when we go out and we say, well, there aren't, 30 or 50 different wildflowers for us to be seeing now in these winter months, but we might see fewer species that are calling to us, but we then can notice the plants that we either want to share because we think we've taken nice photos of them, it would be good examples, or we think they're unusual plants, but we also can take photos of plants whose species we haven't
been able to identify ourselves, and iNaturalist folks will help us identify them. So
yeah, I
so
do want to
much.
just mention the caveat of the difficulty of identifying plants when they don't have diagnostic features like flowers.
This is the question I perhaps did not ask well enough, and that is what makes for good photographs of plants that you want to have ID'd.
Yeah,
Please
I mean, it's as many photographs as you can get. And it really just depends on what plant and where you're at. Sometimes there's lookalikes, sometimes there's not. As many pictures as you can possibly get in there is really my advice. Especially if you're genuinely curious, like you really want to know what this plant is, you can't go wrong. When I do uploads of mosses, I'm talking sometimes like 20 plus pictures of a single species of moss, just because there's so much to document. And I want to learn about mosses and I want to be corroborated. And so I want to make sure I've included every little bit of information. And with the larger plants, if I had a nickel for every time I've taken 10 pictures of a plant and not photographed the one thing that I need to actually identify it from pictures later, I'd be a very rich man.
So Shane, what are your tips? Shane, what are your tips for those of us who are just getting started in this world of posting photos in hopes that someone will help us ID a plant, of the most salient features of a plant to include in those photos?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first and foremost, reproductive parts are always going to be really important. And if a plant's flowering, you obviously want to include the flower. A lot of other plants can be identified vegetatively. Some can't. And really, my general advice is just jump in, start posting things, and then just don't get frustrated if you don't get an identification on something. Most likely, someone will comment and they'll say like, you'll post a manzanita and they'll be like, "This is Arctostaphylos," but I can't tell you what species it is. And, I try to explain myself as much as possible. So I might say in our area, we don't have a huge diversity of manzanitas, but if you don't include a picture of the flowers, I don't know for sure. So if you just have a picture of the leaves of a manzanita, the best I can say is it's a manzanita. But you need to include the flowers for that. And it's different for every group of plants. So that's why I say, just dive in there, find out what works. People like myself or David or other people who use iNaturalist will typically say like, this is what I'd need. And then the next time you go out, at least for me, like I'd remember that thing. I'd remember to include that. Oh, right. I need to include flowers with my manzanitas. There's a person on there called Paloma. And she helped me out a lot when I was first getting going with iNaturalist, because I would just say, I would do that thing of like comparing a plant to the pictures in the field guide and then saying it's this. And she'd be like, well, how do you know it's this without this feature? And it just pushed me to get more and more into this. And ultimately, it's why I feel like I owe iNaturalist like a huge debt as far as building me up as a self-taught botanist. It would have been so much more difficult. Like the shoulders that they provide for me to stand on are just towering. And I almost brought this in, but there's a meme where it's like, back in the day, essentially, you'd have to carry tens of pounds of photography gear out into the field, and you'd have to time it just right so that you had the right light to take a picture, and you'd bring your notebooks and you'd make these meticulous notes. And then us on iNaturalist, we just hold up our phone, take a picture, and we can identify things. So it's so much easier these days when utilizing technology. It's pretty amazing. What a time to be alive.
I'm not out there sketching by hand, relying on how skilled am I at doing botanical illustrations.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Shane. People don't have any other questions. I think we can wrap this up, but I'm sure that, we should definitely say, Shane, while I'm just saying this, I'm sure you can post it faster than I can. Let's post the links to our Redbud Facebook page, and then to our Facebook group, so that people who would like to can join our Facebook, can ask to join our Facebook group. And I'll definitely say that Shane is very frequently present on these two sites. And the Facebook group is you have to ask to join, and then you're accepted and you get in. And it is a great place to ask questions. So if you have a question that occurs to you tomorrow that you didn't ask today, you can post it there, and Shane or someone else knowledgeable will answer your question.
Yes, please reach out anytime. You can send me an email too. My email's shanehanofee@gmail.com, just like under my chin there. Always happy to talk about plants. Happy to go in more depth on any of the stuff I cover today. Yeah, anytime, please reach out. I would enjoy that a lot. Okay, and I'm looking for the link right now.
Okay, here's our Facebook page is this. And just a second, I will get we'll see here. Got it. Oh, let's see here. And Facebook forum, so it's our group. What's this? Here we go. Remember that this is being recorded. So if you want to go back and review any of this later, or share this information with other people later, you can do so. Shane, somebody asked, when would this recording be available? And I said, Shane would have it up within a week, because that's what
within a week. I mean,
done. But I bet you. Are you going to go to bed tonight without posting it up, or will it be in the morning,
no,
Shane?
It'll be up there. Well, let me just double check, but I'm pretty sure it'll be up there in about 10 minutes. Like 10 minutes after we end the meeting. So long as, because I wasn't able to monitor the stream, so long as we didn't get cut off at some point, then it'll be up in 10 minutes. Otherwise, I've got, it'll be a few days. No, we're still good. So yeah, 10 minutes.
Great. Do you have the link to our Redbud YouTube channel?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Oh, it's not a clickable one, but
okay.
It's youtube.com/redbud CMPS. Or you can just search Google for Redbud CMPS.
That's right. We now have then this is the first public announcement of the fact that primarily exclusively thanks to Shane, our Redbud channel, our channel on YouTube now has enough followers that we can have our own name on YouTube, rather than having to have a random string of digits and letters. So how wonderful that is. So
yeah, it's a lot easier to find us now.
It's terrific. Yes. So that's where it will be. If for any reason you go, well, I can't remember, just go to YouTube and type in Redbud CNPS, and it will bring up our channel. So you don't need to remember you don't need to have the link in order to be able to find us. And also the link will be on our Redbud website under events, under past events, because this will then be a past event. It'll be on the same post as the information about this event.
That's correct. Yeah, and check out some of the other CMPS chapters YouTube channels as well. During this time, we've most of the 35 chapters have been putting out virtual events this whole year, and because we have YouTube channels now, they're up for you to watch at any time at your leisure. And there's been some really amazing programs this whole year, so I really highly recommend checking out. And you can actually find those other chapters pages by going to our page and looking at the featured channels on our YouTube channel front page.
Well, that's
so highly recommended.
Well, Shane, thank you so much for the really informative and lively event this evening. It's been so wonderful, and I can see how it can really inform so much of how we all think about using what we see and learning more about what we see when we go out into the wild.
Absolutely. Happy to be able to present, and thanks to everyone who stuck around to the bitter end here. All right. Well, have a good night.
You too. Thanks, everybody. And thanks for coming.